I'm Jackie Lovejoy. I'm president of the Dearborn Area Chamber of Commerce, and with me today on our show, So That's What You Do, is Dearborn Heights' own city clerk, Walt Prusiewicz. And I'd love to thank you for being on the show today.
Well, thank you, Jackie, for inviting me. I appreciate you having me.
It's my pleasure. So, city clerk, a lot of people don't know what that title means. And for me, the primary election's coming up, so I know you're in charge of that, but you're in charge of so much more. Give us a small snapshot of a couple of days in your world.
City clerk's office is a very diverse office. We have so much to do with the city. First and foremost, of course, elections. We administer the elections. We take care of pet licensing. We license all cats and dogs in the city. We take care of all business licensing. A big part of our job is taking care of the city council. The city council secretary works in our office, and she administers the agendas and takes care of all the council needs. We also are the keeper of the records for the city. Vital records. We have to issue death certificates and birth certificates of those events that happened in the city of Dearborn Heights. A lot of people have misunderstandings. They think that if they live in Dearborn Heights, they get a death certificate, but it's only if the death occurred in the city. So being we don't have too many hospitals, we don't have any hospitals, we don't have too many birth certificates to issue. We have about one home birth or two a year.
Oh my gosh, okay.
But that's kind of an idea of what we do, and it's kind of a fast-paced and exciting office to work in because there's always something going on, something different going on. Lastly, the Michigan Qualified Voter File, we have to dedicate a couple hours a day to that. We are constantly updating the voter records. We get reports from Lansing every day, and so we maintain those voter registration files. So
So when we come in to vote, everything's accurate when I show up with my license, and everyone knows who I am. It's amazing.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So how did you come to this job? How long have you been in the role?
Oh, I have been here since 2011, and it was kind of a slip and fall into the job, I guess, is the way you say it. I was watching the council meeting one night, and the city clerk prior to me was retiring, and they needed to fill the role part-time. And they asked for applications, and I had some experience which I thought would fit in, and wasn't working at the time, and said, well, there's something I can do and fill in and help the city. So I applied. The city council did appoint me. I got here, and I liked what I was doing and felt that I could contribute to the city, so I decided to run for the job, and the good people of the city of Dearborn Heights elected me, and
here you are.
Here I am.
Since 2011.
Since 2011, yes.
Hey, that's great. So tell us a little bit about your past. What did you do before this?
Before that, I was an employee with Wayne County. I spent 30 years in a very diverse...
now, I find that hard to believe. So you had a career.
I had a career.
You're home watching TV.
I was retired at the time.
Okay.
And...
you wouldn't guess it.
You wouldn't guess it. As I say, it's kind of like a slip into the job.
Okay, great. That's kind of how so I was with Davenport University for 15 years, and the headhunter called me, and I recommended 3 of my friends to be the president of the chamber. And then he called me back. He goes, don't you do these things? And I said, well, yeah, I guess I should. Being I'm in career services, I should go on the interview. And boy, you know, my dream job. So, no. So we're both here, you know, happily.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So talk a little bit, what are we sitting around right now?
What are we sitting around? We're sitting around our, what we call Election Central, and behind us are all the tabulators. We have 27 precincts in the city, and we also do our absentee counting on the day of the election back here, and we use these tabulators, the same machines that you go and vote. We process
Put your ballot in, sure.
Right. So people think putting together an election, you just roll out the equipment the day of, and there you go. But it's quite an undertaking. We start actually in June. We have to prepare the equipment. Interestingly enough, what we're doing right now, we're waiting for the coding from the company of the ballots, and we have to test each and every piece of equipment. And what we have to do is prepare test ballots for this particular election. There's about 60 for each election, and we have to code them for every conceivable event. Overvotes, voting in the wrong precinct. In this election, it's a primary, which you can only vote in a single party. So crossover votes, we have to make sure that the equipment performs up to the standards required by the state, and that it accepts only the votes that are valid and will reject the ballots that are improperly formatted.
Oh, very good. So if somebody does fill out their ballot incorrectly, it's rejected, and then a voter volunteer, you know, or a poll volunteer, I guess, would be there, and they'd say, oh, this is wrong on your ballot or something, and they give that person a fresh ballot?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So in that event, the machine would spit it out, it would beep, it would give a error message on the LED screen, and the poll worker would then relate to the to the voter exactly what they did wrong, whether they crossed over or whether they voted. For instance, you can only vote one in this particular category.
And somebody voted two or three.
So then what we do is we spoil their ballot. We take that out of the computer. The ballot is put into a special envelope to prove that it hasn't been counted more than once. Then we issue them a second ballot, and they go back to the booth and they vote again and get their vote properly counted.
Properly counted. And I have to tell you, I'm surprised, you know, I'm not that techie, but every machine is assigned to a precinct. So it's not just a random rolling out of the machines, even if you test them. This machine is assigned to precinct 20, and this one to 22. And so you know this machine's accountable for those folks.
Exactly. Part of the reason for that, they all have serial numbers. Once we program them and once we're satisfied that they're working, we have to seal them up. And we record the seals. We have to report those to Wayne County ahead of time. The poll workers in the morning have to verify that the seals numbers that we put in the book are the seal numbers that are there, so there is no evidence of tampering with the machine. And then at the end of the night, they have to cut those seals off. When they take the memory cards off, we retain them in a envelope, in a actually a small bag, and Wayne County, they audit 7 communities after every election. So we have to retain all that, and they will come and check to make sure that everything is done according to the standards that are required by the state of Michigan and the county of Wayne.
That's amazing. And people never think of all the behind the scenes that goes on to make sure that your vote is fair, counted, that there's checks and balances everywhere.
We have a lot of checks and balances. There's a lot of controversy about elections now and tampering and so forth. But here in the state of Michigan, we have so many checks and balances and so much oversight that you know, it's just not happening with what people think.
That's good. That's wonderful. That puts my mind at ease. It's I think. I always think, you know, if you have that much time on your hands where you can actually outsmart all the checks and balances, really use your powers for good.
Yes, absolutely.
Go run for office yourself.
Absolutely.
A second vote. Really. Go do well. Do good in the world. So tell me a little bit more. What else would you love people to know about this role?
Well, our absentee ballots. We are accepting absentee ballots right now. And as you may be able to see on our tables there, are absentee ballots for all 27 precincts. Oh. And what happens, and once again, I'd like to talk a little bit about the safeguards so people are confident, because people don't understand. We get phone calls, do you only count the absentee ballots if the election's close? Or you already know ahead of time how many ballots, how many votes were gotten before the election day, and those are some misconceptions. By law, we cannot start counting ballots until election day morning when the polls open at 7 o'clock. So the envelopes that come back, first of all, are never opened. But just to talk a little about our absentee ballot system, to begin with, you have to fill out an absentee application for every election.
Exactly. It's not just a random thing that gets mailed out.
Many people say, oh, I always get a ballot for every election. I didn't get one. No, we don't just send ballots out. You have to actually apply. When these come in, we have to make sure that you're eligible for an absentee ballot. You have to be over the age of 60.
Deployed military.
Right, you're working the polls, religious tenets. There's various qualifications, being away from the community for the day. So you have to check that. in this election, to save money for the city of Dearborn Heights, we have a dual application where we have both elections, the August and the November, or you could just request one or the other. And then you must sign it. When we get these, we check your signature either against the Michigan Qualified Voter File, which we have electronic signatures. If it's not there, we check it against our card file. And believe it or not, in our office, we have a huge Rolodex, and we have a voter card for every voter. So we have 36,000 cards there. So we make sure that the person who signed this is actually the person who's the registered voter, and we will not send a ballot unless we're confident that that person. The reason you have to apply for one after each election, is to make sure you're still a resident in the city, that you haven't moved,
Sure.
and that you're still an active voter. So that's the application process. So when the ballots are sent out, we send them out in a secrecy sleeve and then in an envelope. And maybe Jackie later will talk a little bit about this particular election. And,
Okay.
But when they come back in a sealed envelope, and the people must sign the sealed envelope. When they're returned, we check that sealed envelope signature against the signature.
Very good.
Once again, make sure that the voter who that was intended to actually filled it out and returned it.
So for recommendations for higher ed, coincidentally, so if somebody wants to go to graduate school or they want to get into a particular program, they have somebody recommend them, and that's a requirement of many colleges is I'll write you a letter of recommendation, but I also have to sign my name across the seal. They want to make sure students aren't writing their own letters of recommendation.
Yep.
So it's that's a very valid way to verify who's who.
So, as I say, there's many safeguards to make sure that.
Besides your Rolodex.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's one ballot per person. So.
As try as some people might.
Yes.
Okay. So this is actually a ballot in here, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Do you want to take a look at that?
Sure. We could talk about this ballot. And in this particular election, this is a primary. Mm-hmm. And we have partisan area. Mm-hmm. In this election, you can only vote in one party. If you want to vote Republican, you must vote all the Republican races or as many as you would like to. You do not have to vote in every race, but you cannot vote for a Republican candidate, say for instance for governor, mm-hmm. and then vote for a Democratic candidate for U.S. representatives. Mm-hmm. That would negate your ballot.
And that's true of any primary, correct?
That's true in the primaries, right. In the general elections, you may cross over and you can vote for
anywhere.
Whoever you want. This year, there's an interesting addition to the ballot. The Libertarian Party has achieved ballot status, so there's a section for the Libertarians.
Okay.
On the back, in this election, we also have some selections. So if you are getting your ballot at home or you're going to the polls,
don't forget to turn it over.
And then also, we have one Wayne County Public Transportation Village on the right-hand side. So you really need to read these carefully. It tells you exactly how many times you can vote for each office. Mm-hmm. And interesting enough, on this ballot, we have the U.S. representative in the 13th district. It's vacated right now. So there's going to be it listed twice. There will be a partial term, which will complete this year, mm-hmm. ending on 12/31/2018, and then there's another election for the new term.
So make sure you vote for both.
So make sure you vote for both.
That's fascinating. And there are many, as we go to the November election, this will be far more filled up with different issues, different offices, things like that, correct?
We expect more proposals, yes. The offices, this time we have precinct delegates, actually, too. In the November election, we will have school board elections. So the precinct delegates won't appear, but the school board will be appearing in November.
Very good.
And just another thing, each ballot has a ballot number. Mm-hmm. So when you return your ballots by mail, your ballot number will be on the envelope. And when we open them, we make sure that the ballot number
matches the envelope.
Matches the envelope. So
I'm a quick student.
There you go.
That's wonderful. That's great. And to handle this level of meticulous fact checking. To me, that's not my forte. So hats off to you. But it's nice that you have all the tools too. You have the Rolodex, you have the ballot number, you have the envelope, you have the signature check. There's a lot of safeguards that a lot of people just don't naturally think of.
There's a lot of safeguards. There's a lot of detail. As you said, you're constantly checking signatures. You're checking ballot numbers. You're checking in the computer. On election day, for instance, when we're doing our absentee ballot counting, we have boards, and we have 5 people on each board. So there's no collusion. One opens up the envelope, one checks the ballot number against the envelope, one rips off the ballot stub, one unfolds them, we stack them so nobody's watching who votes for who. Everybody's vote is anonymous. The other thing is, once again, on election day, when we get these ballots, we zap them into the computer like you do at Kroger's with a
barcode reader.
Barcode, and that tells the QVF that we have received the ballot. So we give the workers a list of all the ballots that we received. So they have to make sure that every ballot we received is there.
And then the machine makes sure every ballot is counted.
Exactly. Then at the end of the night, there's paperwork that we have to fill out, and we report that to Wayne County. And we have, what is the poll book? We have to report how many ballots were issued, how many ballots were returned, the votes. And then there are memory cards in here, which, if this will open, they're inserted in there, and that's where the programming is. We have to take these memory cards out. We have to, after everybody goes home, after everybody's done voting at 8 o'clock.
It's a big coffee day.
It is. And we're here, and we do all our paperwork. We have to have all our precinct workers come back. We have to check their equipment, check their report books to make sure they're done right. They have to have reports on flash drives. The state requires on specially encrypted flash drives, and we have to print those reports. And then after all that, we take these flash drives out, their reports, and we get to go downtown to Wayne County
that night
election headquarters and take all our materials there.
Yeah, sure.
And what people don't understand is at the end of the night, you get results, but those are not official. They do not become official. Wayne County has a canvass board, and they spend 4 to 5 days, sometimes longer, after the election, checking all our work, checking those reports, checking the number of ballots, and until they are satisfied that everything is
true and accurate and matches,
then they certify the election.
Now, that's true of all of our counties in Michigan, wouldn't you say that? All the same protocols?
Yes. Yes. The voting procedures are uniform throughout the state of Michigan.
Now, do we find that in other states? They have different protocols or very much the same technology? Or
voting is done on a state-by-state basis, so different states have different laws. There are some states that have only absentee voting, that they do not even have people come to the polls. You have some states where they have early voting, where they vote for 10 days. So it's governed by the states.
So we try and get up early at my house. We try and be, my husband and I call each other once we both get to work. What number were you? Because he goes to work at 5:30. So the polls aren't open yet. But I'll call and say, ooh, I was number 11 today.
Well, people like to get there before work. In Dearborn Heights, we've been fortunate. We manage our lines pretty well. You might wait in the morning, you might wait in the evening after, but of course the best time to go is, if you can, is during the day.
Sure. Where, so he finishes early. So between 3 and 4, the polls are relatively light, before everybody normally gets out of work. So it's always, and some days he'll say, oh, I'm number 200. And other days it's like I'm 1,222.
Of course, the presidential election brings out, a much greater turnout, oftentimes in the upper 60 percentile. Our local elections, unfortunately, are not well attended.
Yes.
It is, and they are, in the 18% to 25%.
So it's important to vote, just to get in the habit of it. You know, it's one of the great freedoms we have in our country. You know, to exercise your right to choose. And there's nothing worse than somebody who's sitting at home with sour grapes and they didn't go to the polls that day.
Exactly.
So you start locally. It's great to vote in the big elections, but it's important to vote all the way to help feed that pipeline. People need to understand that.
I've done some presentations to students, and I asked them, what's the most important election to vote in? And oftentimes the answer is the presidential. And my answer to that is they're all important. Every election is important. At the local level, you're going to have, I think, your most impact where...
Because they affect my daily life. I mean, if you want to look at minutia, my garbage pickup, my taxes, what's going on in my neighborhood, things like that. And, you know, those are small items. But if you get a big item in front of city council or your mayor or something's going on, or, for instance, FEMA came for Dearborn Heights, we had those streets that flooded habitually. Mm-hmm. It's great to have good leaders in place when those sorts of things come down the pike. And so, of all things, the pike. So it's important to vote at the local level.
Yeah, I believe that too. And at your local level, if you write your congressman, of course, you'll get an answer. Sometimes it's from an intern, sometimes it's a canned answer, or thank you for your interest, and we'll look into that. At the local level, we all live in the community. We're all accessible. All your local officials will talk to you. I've been stopped everywhere, in the grocery store, everywhere. How about this? How about that? So where can you make your most impact? My belief is really at the local level. But once again, every office is important. Every election is important, from a school board election all the way up to the presidential. And just to be in the habit of voting and to be in the habit of being informed is, at least for me, has been a lifelong process.
Absolutely. And it's not always easy. You have to inform yourself. You have to read the issues. I try very hard not to watch the television, and we do the old-fashioned way at my house. We get the paper, you know, and usually leading up to the election, but the Sunday before, any election, the Sunday before any election, every issue, every candidate's in that paper, and you have facts printed in the paper. That's the beauty of journalism. So I always say, for all the money spent, and please, TV reporters, forgive me, for all the money spent on television ads, the facts, you know, they are swayed by whoever pays for that ad. The facts are printed in the paper. It's work to educate yourself, but you really should. You
really should. I agree with you on that, Jackie.
So, Walt, what else about this office? So the primary is August 7th. The election is November 6th, true? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. We have
I'm trying to think, and the dates kind of run in.
Check our phones. Yes.
We were just talking. If I could diverge for a minute, we were just talking in the office this morning. There's so many different dates we have. Going back to the elections, we have to publish 3 different legal notices in the newspaper. The call of the election, 30 days prior to be registered to vote. So those dates all kind of run together.
Especially in your world. That's your world.
But yes, the elections are always, it's August 7th and November 6th, and they're always the first Tuesday after the first Monday in August and November. So that's the way we kind of remember the dates of the election.
Sure. Well, I cheated. I looked at the absentee ballot. I saw that when you were displaying. I thought, okay. I don't keep all of that in my head all the time. So what other nugget besides voting would you love folks to know about the city clerk's office? What's your second biggest role?
Second biggest role is really being involved with the city council and getting the agendas out. It's a collaborative effort between many different departments in the city. We receive the information from many different departments. We have to put it together. We have to put together an agenda and get it in a concise form into the city council in a timely fashion so they can study it and be ready for the Tuesday meeting. Sure.
Sure, that's fantastic. So I think we're just about out of time. I can see people frantically waving off camera. I'd like to thank you for having us here today. People don't realize all the work that goes on behind the scenes. So if everyone's out at the polls, make sure you thank all your volunteers. If you see Walt, thank him, thank his office, thank Kathy, and stay tuned for our next edition of So That's What You Do on Dearborn Heights TV.